Hello, I'm Matt Roberts with Athletic Director U and D1 Ticker here at the 2019 NCAA Convention in sunny Orlando, joined by Scott Barnes, Athletic Director at Oregon State. Let's dive right in. We've discussed the topic of matching company culture with brand, which sounds a little nebulous, I understand, but I think the context of where I want to start this, Scott, is given the timing of our conversation and the Pac-12's positioning and some of the challenges that the league has had, at least externally from a positioning standpoint. We know there are differences institutionally in the Pac-12 than there are in other Power 5 conferences, but as it specifically relates to Oregon State, how do you think about the unique culture that was already instilled in Corvallis when you arrived, maybe some additional elements that you've seen and want to impart in terms of the path of the culture for the institution, and how that strategically aligns to conference marketplace, state marketplace, regional marketplace, and then ultimately, of course, national market?
Yeah. A lot to unpack there. It's a great questions. Culture, it's a little bit like fish and water. You live in and around a place, and maybe you don't really know how to define culture in some ways because you live it every day. That said, being on board for a couple of years and observing and talking and planning, there's some things that absolutely stand out at Oregon State, and I think one of them is this sort of understated blue collar mentality. A sincere, authentic sort of grinder mentality, and that permeates through all of our programs. And as we launched our strategic plan and some of the other things we're doing, we've kept that in mind and we've ingrained that, and that's what our fans are about as well. And so there's a match there.
I'm thinking of some of the leaders and head coaches that you have within your department and their backgrounds. Jonathan Smith, of course, former student athlete, former football player. Wayne came from Montana. How do you think about, many people might go, okay, well, the offensive coordinator at USC would never fit at Oregon State. Well, Dennis Erickson fit pretty well at Oregon State, and he has an interesting background, of course, right? How do you think about, though, from whether it's administrators or head coaches, truly drilling down on that understated blue-collar mentality that you describe about your fan base and the culture of your brand, and identify that in leaders that you are going to bring to be a part of what you are building?
Well, first, Matt, it's so important, obvious statement, but when you're recruiting, whether it's administrator or a coach, it's not just about getting them, it's about retaining them. And so that fit becomes really important. And that can be vetted in the interview process. We talk about who we are a lot, and, we're the best college town in America, so we think, and we take pride in that. We're a small community. We are, in the Northwest, if you like the outdoors, but it's not a fit for everybody. So clearly defining who we are and what we're trying to get done, including expectations around what we're getting. We want to win championships. We really do. And we're going to do it probably a little differently than some. And I think by vetting and having real conversations about that, not only do you find that right fit, but you tend to have folks like the Pat Caseys and the Scott Rooks and others who have endeared themselves to the community and aren't going anywhere.
What's different in that process between coaches and administrators?
Well, I think the one of the things is the marketplace as it relates to the aggressive pursuit of excellent coaches. And certainly that occurs a bit at the administrative level, but it can be a fist fight. So when you're recruiting somebody, Jonathan Smith, who played and was a local legend at Oregon State and has great memories of being a student on our campus, that's an individual we know will succeed, and we'll continue to give them the right tools, but have an opportunity to create a lot of continuity over time by him staying where he's at. But I think there's always a next level. And whether that be the NFL or anything else. And so just the marketplace and the aggressive pursuit of coaches is something that we all get involved with.
Yeah, I want to ask about your own personal connection to that brand before you became athletic director at Oregon State, and I've been curious to ask you this for a while. And your background, of course, was Pitt and Utah State and Eastern Washington, of course, senior administration, but Humboldt State. People probably don't always remember that.
I barely do.
Well, what I'm curious about is I feel as though many times administrators. This is probably not a fair statement, but guys and gals go, I would fit there or I wouldn't fit there. And given your own path through this industry, how much reflection did you really have to do about, do I match Oregon State? Yeah. And then how did you go through that process to identify if that match was there?
Well, again, being a Northwest native, born in Spokane, and most of my career being in the Northwest or West, this sounds contrived, but I've had Oregon State on my list for over 20 years. As a small college town, Pac-12 footprint, it's always been a place. So relatives that have lived in and around the area, it's really hard, Matt, for us in this industry to match career aspirations with personal and family, and it's hard, and that window doesn't always open at the right time. And so the window opened, and we were ultimately going to be back somehow, some way in the Northwest, and so it wasn't easy. It wasn't difficult, rather, to make that decision to go to Oregon State, and felt like the culture of what we've talked about was a good fit for who I am as a person.
Yeah, that institutional brand fit with the athletic director, core value brand fit, I think I could ask a million questions about that. It's a whole different series of conversations. I want to hit you with a quote, which I prepared you for a little bit, and this is from a branding consultant and notable author. Her name is Denise Lee Yohn, and she says on this topic of matching company culture with brand, how you can tell if your culture and your brand aren't how can you tell if your culture and brand aren't interdependent and mutually reinforcing? A disconnect between your employee experiences and your customer experiences is a telltale sign. So for you, it's how would you compare your employees' experiences with those of your fan bases, and are they aligned?
Yeah, I think the way to tell that is by asking. We do a lot of connecting. In fact, when we rolled out our strategic plan last year, we had 100 people involved in it, including community folks. We have a fan experience committee that tells us what thousands and thousands of our Beaver Nation are looking for and want. Our employees are involved in that same process. So taking ownership as a fan and as an employee helps bring that out, helps that alignment, because you're working towards the same goal. And we have a lot of volunteer structure, from representative model that we're building in our Beaver Nation fund drive to the top, where I've got 16 CEO presidents on a board of advisors and everything in between, including the fan experience committee. Those volunteers working with our staff bring instant alignment. Because you can't get stuff done if you're not aligned. And so what I'm excited about in that regard is that we built the plan together and we're executing together, fans and employees.
There's some programs that we've discussed that are having extremely high level success. Women's basketball, clearly baseball. We talked about men's basketball before we started recording here, and their opportunity to take, as a lot of teams do in the Pac-12, take hold of the conference race right now. Do you anticipate, when football reaches a level of success that you are satisfied with and the fan base that is satisfied with, experientially, how do you expect the fan base to talk about that, and how does that match with the brand?
That's interesting. I think you think about expectations, and are those aligned, and are they ever aligned between administration and fans? They want more and more, feed the beast, right? But I think I know what we're looking for, and that's sustained excellence. And for us in football, that's described by regular bowl appearances and spikes that get us to conference championships and beyond. And I think there is an alignment with the fan base on that. We talk about it a lot, about that being our goal, because we can't get there without their investment, and then an investment in a plan. And we talk about the plan a lot. I'm
always interested in asking athletic directors if there are other organizations, whether it be peer athletic departments, Fortune 5 companies, specific individual sport programs that you would point to and say, I take a lot of credence in how that organization was built culturally, and there are values that I want to learn from that organization that may be applicable to what we're doing, may not be.
Yeah.
But are there any that are top of mind for you in that regard?
Yeah, I think a lot when we run our organization, the way that we do things. I think a lot about the Pittsburgh Steelers, believe it or not, and having been there for a couple of years and having had just a wonderful partnership with the Rooney family and sharing the same playing venue, the practice venue, and being around them and watching what they do and how they do it. Here's a program, an organization that has been one of the most successful in the world in over a period of time, sustained excellence for a long, long time. And yet some of those attributes we talked about, or culture we talked about earlier, the understated, if you think about the Rooney family, they're understated, they're unassuming, they're incredible competitors, but they're humble, and they're built on this blue-collar work ethic mentality. And we've talked about that as it relates to Oregon State. So that would be one organization that you look at and you say, hey, they've had sustained excellence for a long time, and they're doing it in similar fashion to how we've done it and how we want to continue to do it.
Are there, I think strategically, I would look at Oregon and Oregon State and immediately see differences on how I would position the brands. But what are the similarities between the two? What are the balancers between the two that maybe it's the state bond of a common thread, but are there some similarities between the two brands?
You got land grant, mission, 45 minutes apart, the Northwest, we all like the same wine and beer. I think we are different. We're a different brand. And neither one of them are better or worse than the other. They're just different in terms of how they approach things, and that's
it's what makes rivalries.
That's what makes rivalries. It's what creates this enormously popular enterprise we call intercollegiate athletics, and the fans that are engaged in it. So it's rivalries are slowly dying, and as we look at conference alignment and those issues, those rivalries become more and more important, and you want to keep those alive. And that one, the Civil War, is alive and well.
Here's one thing I have wanted to ask you, and I think about it in the context of, I'm in Louisville, and I think about it in Kentucky football context. There are some brands, I think Oregon State and Kentucky would kind of be in the same boat, where this regular bowl appearances and spikes, like that's all the fan base wants. I've always teased Mitch, like, you have an algorithm internally that says if we win 6 games, here's the return on investment that I can. If we win 8 games, and like you used that to structure Mark's deal, and I'm like, no. Like, I bet there's an out. So I'm saying it more anecdotally that I wonder if I'm sure there's data cats that are smart enough to figure that out, but those two brands are somewhat similar to me.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, and our best opportunity for revenue growth is football, and we don't. What amazes me about Oregon State is, you're 1-11, and they come. They come. You play women's basketball. There's nobody that has a better attendance. We're one of the best in the country in attendance, and sure in the West, and we're winning. But it's sustained winning that I think is important. It's not a fleeting. It's sustaining excellence at a certain level, and then peaking beyond that. That's where we're going to see real growth in terms of revenue. Is year 3 of the third bowl game. I liken it a little bit to Utah State, land grant, similar. And it took care. It wasn't until our third year that we went from 4,000 season tickets to 12, but it wasn't after our first year winning. It was small growth until about the third year winning.